Now that we have our Excel spreadsheets for our feature definitions and our symbologies created, it's time to go in and edit these two spreadsheets. These spreadsheets represent the center core of your workspace, pointing to all of your element templates, setting up your folder structures at Project Explorer, all of your settings for your corridor feature definitions. Everything is in these two spreadsheets related to OpenRoads Designer Connect Edition and all of these civil properties. And so you're going to definitely spend quite a bit of time working in these particular areas. I always suggest that we start with the symbologies because the feature definitions actually point to the symbology paths. And so getting these symbologies where we want them in their folder structures and getting the proper element templates set is a logical order in terms of the way that you want to do things. If we take a look at this symbologies spreadsheet, there are 5 tabs: point, linear, profile, surface, and solid. Solid is going to be used for subsurface utility features, and so that's not something that we are currently supporting right now in terms of importing and exporting all of the subsurface feature definitions and symbologies, and so there's nothing to do right now in the solid tab. In the point symbologies and as well as linear, profile, and surface, this is all about how something is drawn in terms of their symbologies, in terms of annotations, and so those are the two main key categories, is symbology and annotation. All of your symbology for each of these is controlled through MicroStation's element templates. All of your annotations are controlled through what are called annotation definitions and annotation groups, which will be covered in a different training series along this same learning path. So what I want to go through here is the tabs and some recommended best practices. One of the things that you're going to find out when you do this for the first time, bringing forth your Select Series 4 environment, you're more than likely going to find a few mistakes that you might have missed or inconsistencies. The nice thing about this spreadsheet is it lumps everything together in a nice organized format to allow you to identify areas that you need to work on. And so here's an example of something that you might want to consider on all of your symbologies, is to take advantage of the default element template if you're going to use the same symbology in your 2D plan view as well as your 3D model. And so you can see here everything matches. So I can literally take what's in this column and I can copy this over to the default template and paste it, and then I can come over here and delete this. Now why would I do that? Well, when you think about maintenance, if I have 2 entries versus 1 entry, and I need to, for example, change location of an element template or whatever, now I can just come back to my spreadsheet and make 1 modification versus 2, and again, avoiding potential problems with consistencies and carrying through those changes. And so, just a little example. So let's take a look at our linear feature symbologies. And so these are the symbologies for anything that represents a line in our plan view or our 3D view. And so you see that we have a 3D element template and we have a plan element template. Now we also have 2 additional columns in here, the plan arc, the plan spiral. Is a good example of how you can take advantage of this, and this is done in our training and examples workspace, is we have different colors for arcs and spirals than for tangents, which makes it very easy to identify different pieces of your alignment visually. And so that might be a situation where you may want to use a different element template for your arc or your spirals in your horizontal alignments. So just to kind of break down these columns a little bit, is you have your name and your path, and these paths are something that you really want to pay attention to. For example, in your symbology path in OpenRoads Designer, the first name you put in here is the folder that you're going to create. In other words, it doesn't require you to put the word linear in here as the starting portion of your feature symbology path. So the first name in here is the first folder name that you would see. And so if this is blank, then it's going to put that particular symbology right at the root level under the linear. And so I would strongly suggest using at least one folder name in this particular field, and see how then we have additional folder options if you want, separated by the backslash. The default element template, again, if you're going to use the same element template for your plan and your arcs and your spirals and your 3D, you can come in here and do the same thing. And I'm not going to do all of these, I'm just going to demonstrate. But you could do the same thing here that we did in our point symbologies. And so if I come over here then and literally can delete these, again, if you're not going to make the differences between 3D model and plan, you can make these the same. Now, why would you want to make things different? Let me give you an example. Think about an edge of concrete pavement. An edge of concrete pavement in the last 30 years in MicroStation maybe was the color blue in your 2D plan view. Well, you don't normally see blue concrete out in construction, and so perhaps in your 3D model you use an element template that points to something, that is a color gray. So you're going to make that edge in your model the color of the material, but yet in your 2D plan view, which would be here, maybe you continue to use the color blue that you've been used to your user seeing. And so that's a consideration in your linear symbologies where you might want to use different linear templates. And so there's these things that you want to consider when you're setting all of this up. So you have your name, your path, your default element template, annotation group we'll talk about later. You have your plan element template, your 2D plan view, and then your arc and spiral. And then you have your 3D. And then lastly, you have your crossing point element template. The crossing point element template used to be required to be set to be able to label our cross sections. This is no longer required in OpenRoads Designer. So in your crossing point, consider that your entry for dynamic cross sections. I have set that up in the example and training workspace to be able to show a left and right guardrail, also a cable barrier post, and right-of-way labels. And so typically I'm just going to set this if I want to have a particular cell. So I'll point to an element template that places a cell and be able to show that in the dynamic cross section. So most of the time this column will be empty unless you need to show a cell in your dynamic cross sections. So that is the linear. The profile is pretty much identical in terms of your name, your path, your default, your annotation group. The profile element template, if you want curves to look different than tangents, you can set an element template for here. Then the two differences are going to be your profile projection element template and your profile intersection element template. Your profile intersection element template is one of those templates that we use to draw a big circle in our profile view, for example, where maybe a side road baseline intersects a mainline edge of pavement. You want to see that intersection point. You can use an element template to draw a very large point, and so that would be where you would set this element template. The projection element, in other words, is a profile that's projected from another piece of geometry onto your current piece of geometry. Some people will set the same element template for this for all of their features, and some will just use the same thing that they're doing for their main profile element template. Either is fine. I think when you're doing projections, it's kind of a special case, so I would lean more towards just picking some type of heavy dashed skip dash type line that's real obvious to the users. Hey, this is a projection from another piece of geometry, so that you don't get it confused with your main profile appearance. And so this explains that particular column. So that is your symbologies for your profiles. Your surfaces are things like your terrain models, also your components and your cross sections. And so you'll see some example entries here from one of our state departments. And so you can look at the name, the path again as usual. Make sure that you remember that the first name in this path is going to be a folder that you're creating. Then you have, if you want the profile and the 3D template appearances or what they draw to be the same, you can just use the default column. but here's an example of where they are using two different element templates, and so you would not fill in the default column element template for that. And then lastly, we have an annotation group for meshes. This is not at the time of this recording yet supported, but it is kind of a placeholder for future technology. And so there's that is there. And so that pretty much breaks up what you need to set up for your Symbologies, your feature Symbology spreadsheet. So go ahead at this time and complete this, making sure that you have all of your element templates in place that you're going to need to be able to go in and assign those appropriately.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you want to see more such series, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you next time.